Well, so far we've been concentrating on the lower house and what might happen there in the race between the government and the opposition. There's another very important contest, and that's taking place in the Senate, and we may well see the historic change where the Greens take the balance of power, something that they've been on a trajectory to do for some time now. We're joined in the studio by the leader of the Australian Greens, Bob Brown. You excited?
It's an exciting day for the nation. The calling of an election always is. And I'm very keen to get on with it. I think the Greens are offering a fresh and different point of view to the big parties who line up so much on so many issues. We'll be campaigning also on the stable leadership which we have given to this Parliament. The other parties have had somewhat of a revolving door, and experience which we can bring into a stable crossbench and a safe crossbench in the Senate.
What are your expectations both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives?
Better than ever before. We've got great candidates. We've got a suite of good policies and a good campaign, Chris. It's early days. The Greens are going up in the polls. We respect that. We'll be giving a responsible alternative to the electorate, and I'm looking forward to leading that Green team in the next Senate, whether it's an Abbott or a Gillard government.
Now we're seeing Lindsay Tanner retire in the lower house. Does that make it easier for you to take a lower house seat, do you believe?
Well, yes, it does. Lindsay's been a respected member for Melbourne. Adam Bant took him very close to winning at the last election. He's campaigning very strongly in Melbourne. Our focus will be in the Senate, but we've got good candidates in Melbourne. Dr. Jeff Cowser in Denison, where Duncan Kerr's retired, and in seats like Grayndler, Sydney, Andrew Bartlett, the former leader of the Democrats in Brisbane. A great team, and here in the ACT, where there's always been a Labor and Liberal senator, Lynn Hatfield-Dodds running a very strong campaign to become the first Greens senator from a territory. So it's an exciting time for us, and we've done the work, we've got the record, and we're giving the people a very clear progressive option to the old parties.
Now, on getting the balance of power in the Senate, I know that there was a Liberal Party senator who said to me that they always wanted to have the numbers in the Senate, and when they got them, it destroyed the Liberal Party, it destroyed the coalition, it was the beginning of the end for them. Is it a case of be careful what you wish for, because when you get the balance of power, you will have to compromise on some things, and then you might lose some of your own base?
Well, firstly, there is an alternative to the Greens in that balance, and that is the Abbott Liberals winning another seat and effectively getting control of the Senate. Then you'd have an Abbott-led Senate, and if Julia Gillard's returned in the House, a deadlocked Parliament. The Greens are the antidote to that deadlock. On the matter of the balance of power, no, we've got the experience, we've got the runs on the board. We showed, for example, when Tony Abbott and the opposition were blocking Kevin Rudd's stimulus package, we moved up to the plate. We got a better outcome with a jobs dividend. We saved this nation from recession along with Wayne Swan and Kevin Rudd, and saved hundreds of thousands of jobs. That's the responsible Greens as against the no every time opposition that we've seen in the Senate over the last 3 years.
But in a lot of ways the Greens have been able to act as commentators on Australian politics. Many times when you get on the air, that's what it seems that you are. You commentate on Australian politics when you're going to have to make decisions which will mean compromise. At the moment you can say things like, oh, we should have all of this wind and solar power, but we reserve the right to protest against any wind farm that goes ahead. We should have renewables, and we're not allowed to have nuclear energy. We should do something about our carbon footprint, but you keep tying people's hands behind their back. Aren't you going to have to make some hard choices, and that means that you might lose some of that base which likes to hear nice things but perhaps can't make difficult decisions?
Well, your commentary is a bit out of date. That's the trouble, Chris. We are an action party. We've helped ensure that people didn't lose their bonus for cataract operations. We've kept something of the Howard government's dental care system, but we want a national denticare system. Both the big parties don't want that. We are on the move for high-speed rail in this country when both the big parties have voted that down in the Senate.
But you voted down the government's carbon pollution reduction scheme. There would be a price on carbon in Australia today if you'd gone along with that.
Well, no, I beg to differ. We would be headed for failure on carbon in Australia, and we would be giving $22 billion over the next 10 years to the polluters. That's an exception and a very important one, because we're the action party on climate change, but we put up an alternative. We just don't block like the
It gave you a great election issue, though, didn't it?
Well, I've just heard Julia Gillard saying that confidence and optimism will save us on climate change. No, it won't, Prime Minister. A carbon price, a carbon tax, as put forward by the Greens, on the polluters, not on the people of Australia, but on the polluters, will save us from climate change and will give us that clean, green economy that she's advocating.
Just stay with us for a moment, Senator Bob Brown, because we're going to cross back to Sydney now to the ABC's election analyst Antony Green. And just looking at the trajectory of the Greens, Antony, is it your expectation that they will take the balance of power in the Senate after this election?
Yes, but that will happen even if they just repeat the last election. The Senate numbers are being changed at this election because it's the senators elected in 2004 that are up for election. Even if the Greens do no more than elect the two members facing election, they'll get the balance of power because the coalition will lose seats at this election if they lose government. They're not going to hold 4 seats in Queensland again, or I'd be astonished if they did. I don't think they're going to win 4 in WA, which would be the only way of compensating for that. There'll probably be another state where they'll lose a seat. So the Greens will end up in the balance of power. So that's why everyone's been very confident that it would happen, is just simply because it's the undoing of 2004. And if the Greens do any better than they did in 2007, it just assures their position in the balance of power.
And what about their chances in the lower house?
Well, that'll depend on the campaign. In Melbourne's the seat to watch, but it will depend on their campaign. If you look at Senate figures for the seat of Melbourne over the last few years, the Greens should have won it in 2007 or 2004 if you just look at the Senate figures. So clearly in the past, voters have seen a distinction between the two houses, whether that was a personal vote for Lindsay Tanner or not. But, I mean, I don't make it my business to go around calling contests which are really going to be quite close.
Certainly. Now, Annie, just something on the Greens vote, because it's something that I want to put to Senator Bob Brown. Where does it lie? Is it not mostly an inner urban vote, and isn't its demographic rather rich?
Well, if you go on where the Green vote is, it's higher in areas of high education and inner city. It's lower where you have large proportions of the electorate in working class suburbs. It's lower in areas of high ethnic concentration. It is a quite specific demographic which the appeal is to. Although they do have a broad appeal a broad appeal across the country, but it's concentrated in certain seats, usually in